Good morning to you. It's been a few days. I've been very caught up in quite a few things, including some family issues. But anyway, what I wanted to show you today is the incredibly tangible, literally tangible signs of Imach. And we are now, I think today's the 7th, so we're about 7 days, the end of the first week of Imach. And let me show you. So you all know, of course, that I've been very busy working on the cottage, but I've also been busy working on the land, working with the land, with Mother Earth, in the ongoing preparations for what will be now Bealtaine, which will be the first day of summer. So I'll show you the cottage first, and then, can you guess where I'm going to take you? I think Bealtaine Cottage could be the first place where this has happened. But let me show you what I've been up to around the cottage first. So I've managed to get the entire veranda painted, and you can see the walls. I did start a little glass and mirror mural on this wall, but I pulled it back down again because it took away from the goddess and the plants, and I've decided I want to have more plants actually on the veranda. I want to bring the green into this space and make it more of a sacred space. So this is this end, and I'll just pan down so you can see how fresh it looks. Now I still have to do the windows, around the windows, but that is coming. So I'll take you out this way now. I've been planting up the beds over there, the pottage beds. So I've got more plants to put in. And I've got some unusual plants and some very heavily scented ones. Excuse me. Again, I'm thinking of bees coming out of hibernation early during the winter and the early part of Imach, the early part of the spring. Now if you look down there, you can see the first primroses out. And these are wild primroses that have self-set in that little microclimate down there. I've repainted this side of the shed. I've now discussed plans to take the playhouse shed down with a project to go in its place, which I'm developing. I've got a little bit more on that wall to paint, and I'm just going round now onto the lodge veranda wall and finish off the painting there. Excuse me. I've moved this very old planter, which I've taken with me from over decades. And my father was particularly fond of this planter because, of course, it shows the three graces. So in many ways, which I didn't realise at the time, this brings to mind the three goddesses. And of course, if you're familiar with Irish literature and Irish mythology, Ireland was the land of the three goddesses, which I write a little bit about in my book In Search of the Goddess Rising. So that's been moved. The magnolia is about to break into bloom, and the flowers on that, of course, are beautiful. So you can see now how tranquil the veranda looks. And of course, when all the flowers come into bloom and they're in and around the veranda, that's going to give them a beautiful backdrop this year. So moving on round, there's the boy waiting. So I have repainted the south side of the lodge. Now I've got a second coat to put on up there, as you can see. And this, of course, is weatherproofing it all. And I've used two colours. So I've used the sage and this darker, which is called willow. So I've also repainted the south side of the she shed, again because a lot of the wind and the rain sort of comes in on a slant from the south. So these are particularly vulnerable areas. And I've started to repaint this side. Now I've actually, just come round here, I've actually put a coat on this side as well. So you can see it's well ahead now for the growing season, because of course during the growing season it's very difficult to get anything practical like this done, because I'm caught up in other things. I still have to do the barge board up there, and I've got some to finish off around here. So I've also stuff there for the recycling. I've put a second coat on the door and around the windows, and I'm going to be putting a second coat then on the actual woodwork itself and doing the barge board up here. So let me just take you on down and around. The bird song in the morning has been incredible. It's been really lovely and very uplifting. And of course the light is coming in earlier and earlier each day. This morning I woke up, it was about 7 o'clock, and although it was still dark, the birds were beginning to sing. Now I hear you ask, what is this you've put out on the driveway, Colette? Well, I had a big jar of couscous which I hadn't used for ages, so I just made that up with boiling water this morning and put big dollops of it out over the driveway. And of course I've put them into these little dollops because that way the blackbirds, you know, the bigger birds, can have a breakfast as well, because the small ones can pick up the tiny little bits of grain, but the big ones need to have something a bit more piled up. So now, of course, when I look back up at the cottage, there's a nice continuation of colour around it. Now, I won't be painting the walls of the cottage on this side or the gable end because there's too many plants, and there's enough green on there to give it a nice look. So let's go down the driveway. Let's check just down by the pond, and indeed that's where we're going. We're going down to the pond. Hear the birds. And there's some smoke coming out of the chimney up there. I've lit the stove. And I'm looking and looking, and look, I can see little buds coming out on the forsythia. That's that beautiful yellow flowering shrub. The coppicing on the land continues, and I've got stacks and stacks of wood, nice little logs all piled up, ready to collect and bring up to the barn. I've got to give the barn a jolly good tidy out because I've been just sort of dumping lots and lots of stuff in there in order to clear space to get painting done. So it'll be a time for sorting out quite soon. Of course you can hear the bird song, it just continues. And this will grow in magnitude every day until about Bealtaine itself, which is the 1st of May, and there'll be an absolute orchestra and choral chorus of birdsong. So here we are down at the pond. The clearing of the pondweed, of course, is an ongoing thing, but I might not get that finished until I'm just going to show you until the frogs have finished, because look at what is in the pond. Yes, the first frog spawn. There it is. Isn't it beautiful? The first frog spawn. As I've said over the years, I don't go by the calendar. The calendar to me is nonsensical. I go by Mother Earth because no one knows better than her what is happening and when it's happening. And in our own arrogance and hubris, we think we can determine everything, including the seasons. So there's the first frog spawn. A sure sign of Immock, and absolutely on time. You see, the old Celts had it down to a T how the world worked, because they worked with her. They acknowledged the life in everything. And then in the 17th century, Descartes came along and decided that everything was mechanical. The universe, animals, human beings was all mechanical. And our present day science and understanding of the world around us is entirely based on Descartes. Descartes was so convinced that all life was just mechanical that he used to, what's the word when you decide to pull a body apart? Some of these words my mind will not accept, will not keep. You know, when you take a creature into the laboratory and you decide to cut it up, whatever that word is, it's a hateful word and I can't keep it in my mind, it pollutes my mind. But Descartes used to cut up living dogs, living, breathing dogs without any kind of anaesthetic, because he's seen them as mechanical. That's what our present day science is based upon. So when people say to me, "Oh, but Colette, that's not scientific," well, I have a choice word in response, which rhymes with rollicks. There we go. Least said, soon as mended. So, my ancient ancestors knew when the seasons came. They honoured the earth, they honoured Mother Earth, and that's the life that I choose today. I choose to honour Mother Earth. And there she is. Her message is quite clear. This is Immock. This is spring. I am coming back to life. Magical, isn't it? And remember always, what I say about the word magical or magic. It describes something that we can't explain. Unlike the world of science that seeks to explain everything. Seeks to explain everything. Such arrogance. Was there ever a more arrogant creation than humankind? Unbelievable. So, Imok is here. Imok is here. There's the daffodils, and there's flower buds on them now. And they'll be flowering sometime now before the end of this month, or perhaps even the beginning of March, because that's their cycle. Of course, if I lived nearer the actual ocean itself, the Atlantic Ocean, they would be in flower now, because that's how their cycle would work out, with the warming of the ocean on the land. But I live about 20 miles inland from the ocean, so it's a little bit later. And of course, there's also the sense of smell. I can smell the goddess and the earth rising. I can smell the earthiness. It's like mushrooms. And that's where the life is pushing up through the dead leaves from last autumn. Walk through this way. Jack thinks we're going to go right across the land, but no, we'll just walk up this way. The life is just so energizing. You know, just walking amidst this, I can feel the energy just moving up through my feet almost. Jack! He hears something. Come here. It's unusual for Jack to bark here in the woodland. I wonder what it could be. Might be a deer. And I'll just bring you along here and show you some of the coppicing. So you can see there's been a little bit of a clearing made here. But all this, of course, is willow. And I think the last time I brought you in here, I was showing you some of the willow that had to be cut back, that had to be coppiced, because of course this is fuel, and the willow takes very well to being coppiced because it regenerates then. So you can see here the stacks of wood, and then the long branches laid down into habitat piles. There's two big ones, and that encourages more creatures onto the land. So all this wood I'll be collecting up and bringing up to the barn once it's sorted. And of course these little trees now, these deciduous trees, which will which have a much longer lifespan than the willow, they've got more room now in which to grow. So you can see how that tree is going to excel. And then this little one here, which got broken in several places when the willow came down on it. So that's going to do well, with a habitat pile right beside it. And there's another one there. Jack over there, look, doing his little ballerina dance. Kicking up the... Come here. He says, there was something over there, Mum, and you didn't see it. Well, no, because whatever was over there, Jack, has made a run for it. And here's my little bit of rhododendron. I have rhododendron hither and thither. And people go on about this and say, oh, it takes over, oh, it's terrible, it's invasive, beware, beware. I planted that 16 years ago. It can't possibly invade. It needs space to invade. I keep saying this. Nature abhors a vacuum, and humankind are too stupid and too arrogant to realise that. If you don't want invasive species, for goodness sake, plant the land. Plant. Plant. Plant like your life depends upon it. Because it does. Now, into this area. And finally, managed to repair as best as possible the fairy thorn, which does look rather... bereft at this point in time, but it should come back on, and this will be its new incarnation. Because what happened here was, remember, it had got very, very top heavy, and it was leaning right over, and much of it was dead and dying. And over the course of the winter, with various wind and rain, the whole root system loosened, and you see how it's pushed up the burial stone. So by doing this, I'm now very much hoping and praying that it will regenerate. So, keep an eye on this. Watch this space. It had to have this input from me in order to hopefully keep it going, because in the normal course of events, of course, it would just fall over and then kind of regenerate from the ground up. But this way I'm hoping it will regenerate from the actual stems of its previous lives up. But here we've made habitat piles, and also here, and then that orangey, that dark wood, is blackthorn, because again there was a massive incursion of blackthorn growing around the fairy thorn, which excluded the light from it. Now, what it's also revealed, of course, which I think is amazing. You see this big long stem here with a very healthy canopy on it? That is also part of the fairy thorn. It's growing from just beside this huge rock, and it's growing up towards the light on the south side. So I'm very happy about that has been revealed and has shown itself to be very healthy. That bodes well for this. So I put that off for 10 or 12 years. I kept thinking that it would come back into its own, but of course the fragility of it just became more and more evident. So there's also room now on this side down here to put a few hardwood trees in, because it's opened up a huge space here where all the blackthorn has been taken down. And now, of course, the fairy thorn is going to have a lot more light. It's going to have every chance of regeneration. There's quite a lot of dead wood as well, needs to be taken out from the old rowan tree, because of course that has regenerated very well, and that regenerated from falling over, but it's taken more of a long time. And also there's a slight fragility to that, so I'd like to make sure that that is given more of a chance as well, by taking out and just dropping, just to take off and simply drop the dead wood that's there, because you can see some of the dead wood going right up into the base of the living wood. So all this is about trying to manage the land and trying to understand what's happening, the cycles, the seasons. And it can only be done by forming a relationship with the land, with Mother Earth. Lots of signs of life up here. Lots and lots. And of course, a huge amount of growth of the beautiful moss. And you can also see, of course, because this is a north-facing slope, how the land is sort of falling northwards. You can see that particularly with the old wall here, as it's been pulled away by the weight of the new growth of the rowan. So sensitive land management, sensitive woodland management is essential. And you can't do that from a book. You have to not only get out onto the land, but form a very deep and loving relationship with her. Understand her. You can't have a relationship if it's not based on understanding and respect and love. And all the more so from Mother Earth. So it's going to be very interesting to document the travel of the seasons now, from here on, because of the Compostine, because of the input of work into the land. We'll see how it all goes. I still have some apple trees to prune, and I'm not going to get much done over the coming week. Next week I have quite a few commitments. It takes me away now and then from the property, and so after that I'll be running to catch up with myself. Look at all the growth here on the honeysuckle. See? And you can also see some of the clematis coming through. And I also have about 4 bins of compost which are now